Who Flung Dung, Neutrog's biologically activated nutrient-rich super mulch from garden stores. Neutrog.com.au. This is 5AA Weekends.
23 minutes to 8, Michael Keelan's weekend, Sunday morning. Bit of Rod Stewart.
Yeah.
Dr. Yui's here, thanks to Neutrog. And you know a Neutrog product is great when it's disappeared before it's even arrived in the studio, because Dr. Yui walked in, he dropped the bush tucker on the desk, Lizzie grabbed it and walked straight out the door.
Gone. Bush tucker. Yui, good morning to you.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Let's just quickly spend a minute on a bush tucker. What's it all about?
So I guess, the thing is that people have this image about natives and they just throw them in and you don't fertilise them, you don't look after them, you don't water them. And you'd be surprised how many comments we get on various media things like Facebook and whatever. People go, oh, you never need to fertilise natives, you don't have to look after them. And to some degree that's true, but in many ways, if you actually want them to look their best, you do need to fertilise them. And then people go, oh, all natives are sensitive to phosphate, you can't use any phosphate on them. Again, another myth, because those studies that were done basically with a chemical fertiliser that was really high in phosphate. So most of them had 10% plus. So these guys, they're not gentle fertilisers. These are full-on chemical hard hitters. So all of those things have now sort of effectively confused people on what they should do with natives. So in the end, what we recommend is that you do fertilise your natives, probably twice a year in spring and in autumn. And you can see many of the natives, as soon as it rains, they start to push out leaves and start to become really active. So bush tucker is effectively an organically based, chemically boosted fertiliser. We have reduced the amount of phosphate in it by basically tying it up. So it's perfectly safe to use around any of your natives. And look, it was developed together with Simon Leake and Angus Stewart, and you had Angus Stewart on here, I think, over the Christmas period, and other people might remember him from Gardening Australia. And these guys really know stuff about natives more than I do by any stretch of the imagination. And we've had now the Australian Plant Society in Victoria is endorsing it, so it's been tried in many different natives, so perfectly safe to use. And recommendations are probably about 100 grams per square metre, so a bucket goes a long way. And I think if people start to fertilise their natives, they'll really realise how beautiful some of these natives are, because a lot of people put them in, not look after them, and then they go, oh, they're spindly, they're dry, and of course they are. I mean, a plant will only hold as much leaves as the roots can support, and that's regardless of water. There's also nutrient factors. You can't grow more leaves than you have nutrients.
Yeah.
So if you starve them all the time, they're going to look like crap.
I think we're at fault a bit, commentators and sort of people that grow native plants professionally. They say, oh, they're like low water requiring plants, or they're drought resistant. Well, and people think, oh, I don't
have to water.
No, it's true. You think, well, I won't do it. I won't water them.
But I mean, if you look at it, I mean, they do require less water. I mean, it's the way that their leaves are designed. They have waxy coatings. They have fewer pores. They have, many of them have a silvery type of foliage to reflect some of the heat. But in the end, you don't see natives growing in the middle of the sandy desert.
No, that's
because they do still need water. It's just, but people think, and we've had an extremely dry summer, as we know, and spring, for that matter. And, so they do. They still need all the things that a normal plant does. It's just, yes, they won't burn to a crisp. They'll survive and struggle along with a lot less. But, a deep water once a week, and they just love it. I mean, they will really, really, give you a lot of pleasure and joy. And you don't have that issue of branches falling off and all the rest of it, because when people say, oh, gum trees, the branches fall off. Well, the gum tree, what it does basically is, if it's stressed for water, it cuts the water supply off to an entire branch. It just drops that branch because it can't support those leaves. So it says, well, survival mechanisms.
Yep.
So keep them well fed, keep them watered, and they'll give you a lot of pleasure and, flower better and all the rest of it.
Yui, what was our topic today?
Our topic was native fertilisers, but I accidentally
spot on.
But I accidentally did send you part of the script for next week, which is a really sciencey one next week.
Just to get a sneak peek. Can we ask you a question off our Facebook? A lot of people want to get them hands on a chainsaw. The native drops its branch, then perfect. Comes in well. Yui, hubby's planting out some hydrangeas from pots. Is the soil meant to be acidic? What's the truth with soil type, please?
Well, the hydrangeas, basically the colour's dependent on the soil pH. So if your soil is alkaline, I think they become red, and if your soil is acidic, they're blue. So they're like a bit like the leaves or the colour in the leaves is like a pH indicator. If you think back to high school, you had the old litmus paper.
Yep.
And, you put it on soap or you put it on vinegar and the colour changes. The same sort of thing happens with the hydrangeas. And, of course you do get those white ones and they're pretty much fixed one colour.
Yeah.
They might go a little bit, they might get a bit of a hue to them, but they're generally just one colour. So it doesn't matter. It depends really on what colour you want in your garden. What goes with your colour scheme? Do you have lots of...
So people do that? They change their soils just to the aesthetic of their garden?
Probably not so much these days, but if they buy a pink one and stick it out in their garden, say in Adelaide Hills or an acid soil area, then it will gradually turn to blue. And conversely to that, if you're living in the hills and you want a red one, that ain't going to happen unless you do something about it. So
there you go.
Yeah, it's just... I mean, people do have colour schemes in their gardens.
Yeah.
I mean, people, if you plant a lot of lavender and that sort of thing, you probably after a blue one. You wouldn't necessarily want a pink one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And you with bush tucker, I think I said this. I hope I'm right. You can use it on other plants.
Oh, for sure,
You
yes.
got the bucket and you only got one native plant.
Oh, no.
You can use it on...
You can use them. You can use it on anything.
Yeah,
You can use it on your shrubs. You can use it on your... Yeah, you could even use it, on your ferns or your palms, on anything, really. It's just that what it is, it's designed effectively for natives. In part, we have reduced the level of phosphate. For those few people that do occasionally grow some of those exotics, like some of the banksias and that type of thing, and they come out of WA and parts of New South Wales where the soil is really, really phosphate poor, and those plants do struggle.
I remember years ago when we had our nursery that the guy that grew our native plants, he sometimes used to feed them with, like gum trees, with sulphate ammonia. And they'd be beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh, these lovely trees.
That's right.
Lovely dark green leaves and whatever. So that's just pure nitrogen, isn't it?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So it's a bit
So
of...
they're not weaklings as we know them. They're quite...
No, they are quite hardy. I mean, if you actually look at places like WA where these plants grow, I mean, there's a profusion of different species there. I mean, it's a really, really rich ecosystem. And the only thing they are lacking there really is phosphate. So all the other nutrients are there. So you can see that these plants do require them in order to have that sort of, variety. And people just think, put them in, forget it. And also the other thing people have to remember is that if you go into the bush or into the mallee or whatever, there are other things that happen there that don't happen in your garden, right? The occasional kangaroo will drop dead underneath the gum tree and rot down and provide a rich source of nitrogen and potassium.
there you are.
So you're not going to have that happen.
Roadkill.
You're not going to throw...
Washed off.
That's right. You're not going to throw roadkill around or dead birds and whatever else, happens in the bush. So there's a different... It's slightly different nutrient cycling than what happens in your garden. Our garden tends to be a bit more sterile and more aesthetic, and we don't really let nature take its full course. Having said that, I have seen some gardens where nature has taken its full course.
So I'm looking at a tree growing in a garden on Facebook. We'll go to it after we leave you, Yui, but it's sort of, on the face of it, there's this tree looking fabulous, and the person wants to know why it's not fruiting. You look underneath, and there's all these weeds. There's weeds everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Because the weeds are plants. The plants are taking the nutrient probably that the citrus should get, and that's basically it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? We talked about that last week, about how, especially if you've got new plants and you're putting them in, how you should be mulching around them, because you're competing for, as you said, with the one where they had the Japanese box.
Yes.
Plants are competing all the time for space, for food, for water. And so if you're going to let the weeds grow 2 foot high, well, they're taking nutrients, they're taking water, their roots are competing, and so it's not surprising that, say, a fruit tree or something else may not be flowering or not doing its best because...
Exactly.
So will we see a bucket of dead rue at Neutrog at any stage soon, just to spruce up your garden? No?
Rue booster.
Rue booster.
Karuna. All right. If people want to find out more, they can email you, of course.
Yep, of course.
Facebook.
Yep, info at neutrog.com, or get on our Facebook page and can ask various questions there.
So next week, we'll get the right running sheet.
Yeah.
We'll be...
Give us a little tease. What are we looking forward to next week?
You're looking at bacteriophages.
Oh, gee. Phages. I'm going to have to Google that.
I've had a Faja.
How's your phaja? All right, that's coming up next week with Dr. Huey. Thanks to Neutrog. Thanks again, Huey, for coming in and for bringing the prize too. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's very good.
It boomerang, though, the minute you walked in.
It's great that somebody has a use for it, and it's a great product, and obviously those people that don't win it should go to Stratco or Mitre10 or some of the other places and buy one.
Beautiful.
Just trying to think, who was it? Who did I give it to?
It was the second or third caller. No, it was
Steve. Well, Steve is Lily Pilly.
Correct. It was
Lily Pilly. One battered a bit with the
heat.
weather.
Yeah, I've got a couple of miniature Lily Pillies, and they got.
Are they staying to shoot again now?
Oh yeah, they're looking really good, but a couple of them just got crispified, if there's such a word.
Crispified. Dr. Huey Strower, Neutrog.com.au. Neutrog, of course, go and buy in all good.
That's a very good one.
Garden and hardware stores. As we go to the break, if you were sitting in Los Angeles, Michael, and the sun was shining and you were enjoying lunch, maybe an American beer or two, what would you be doing? Would you be listening to Michael Keelan's Weekend?
Probably not.
Okay, well, Margaret and John are.
Get out.
So Margaret and John Nisbet, who are listening to us right now
look at that.
in the City of Angels, just John's about to polish. Look at the size of that beer.
Yeah, that is huge. What's on his plate, though?
That looks like it. Well, that's his serviette. But he's
serviette.
Yeah, he's just about to have some lunch. So thank you for listening to us. If you are listening to us around the world or here in South Australia, we'd love to get your calls. 8223 0000. We'll take those next.
If ever you've wondered how Crime Stoppers SA work to